Right, UFC Imavov versus, I've forgotten his name, Dolidze. I will go back to the old graphics when I have time, but them videos can take up to 12 hours to make. But anyways, starting off with Thomas Petersen versus Jamal Pogues. Believe it or not, I'm actually going with Pogues to win via decision, or if he's feeling lucky that night, maybe KO, but I doubt it, because Thomas Petersen, he's going out there steamrolling these cans in heavyweight, and the heavyweight division in other promotions are lackluster. There's not really that many talented heavyweights on the regional scene. You don't think of it like that, apart from PFL. But Jamal Pogues has got a good matchup against him because Thomas Petersen, he's a bit like Ben Askren when he comes forward. He leans his head down, not looking at the opponent, and then throwing 1-2s clinch onto you. And Jamal Pogues will be able to deal with that. If you've got a good jab and they're just coming straight down the centre, pop out that jab, and he can't do that. Also, he lost to this guy, Waldo Cortez Acosta, and we all know who Waldo Cortez Acosta is. And again, I don't rate him, and that win, in my opinion, that loss, in my opinion, doesn't even look good to this day. I know he just won his last fight, but some would say Arlovski won that fight. He just don't look good at all. And Jamal Pogues, you might think he's not that good either. It's a battle of a bad bunch. But he's actually a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He got 7 takedowns on the Contender Series. He can actually grapple. He did it against Mick Parkin. I think he's going to be able to stop some of the takedowns. Yeah, it'll be a bit grindy because Petersen's always looking to grab hold of you and bring you down. But he's also a bottle job, kind of, in my opinion. Because he did lose to Waldo Acosta after winning 2 of the rounds. But then started to get confident in his striking, Curtis Blade style, and then gets put away because he's not looking for a takedown and he's looking to strike. So, with Jamal Pogues' footwork, I think he's going to be able to, and takedown defense, by the way, stop these takedowns and just pop out that jab and just go for a decision. Or a late third round finish, because Petersen never really goes past the first round. I believe he's only done it twice in professional MMA. Right, next fight. Marquel Mederos versus Landon Quiñones. At first I went with Quiñones, but I changed my mind. I'm actually going with Mederos to win the fight via decision. I think Landon Quiñones is going to be a very hard guy to knock out. He had to fight Nasrat, and I felt bad for him. Why are you getting that in your first UFC fight? Honestly. But I think the way how Marquel Mederos fights, by pressuring, is going to be a problem for Quiñones, because it's not like pressure, I'll go back a little bit and then come forward. It's constant, I'm going forward, but whilst I'm going forward, I'm switching the stance. And you'll notice that Landon Quiñones likes to use the leg kicks. He was using it on Nasrat Hasparat, and they were tearing up the leg. But because Marquel Mederos is going to be able to switch up the leg kicks whilst pressuring him, I think it's going to eliminate that leg kicking game of Landon Quiñones. And if he tries to target one leg, Mederos can adapt to the other leg. Not only that, his boxing combinations look really good as well, measuring the distance before throwing a strike. He looks very precise with his striking, and he did well on the Contender Series. And Landon Quiñones, he looked good against Nasrat. The amount of volume he was able to throw in his first fight was very good, which could make you believe that he might win this fight via decision, which at first I think he could have, and he still might. But I do think also Marquel Mederos as well, he's got a good grappling game that he can use. He doesn't always tend to use it, but when he does, he tends to do quite well with it with his strikes. And I think he's just going to go out there and just outclass Landon Quiñones. Right, I don't really talk about WMMA on here. You might know that already, but that is what I'm going with for this fight. Just showing you here. Don't want to do a massive explanation. All I'm going to say is that was so impressive what she was able to do with Molly McCann. Luana Carolina got steamrolled by Molly McCann as well, and I think submission. I might be wrong, but yeah. Right, Blake Bilder versus Jeong Lee. A hard one to pick. I am just going with Jeong Lee, and I think he'll do it via decision, because Blake Bilder, when you think of him, he's not one of these guys who has got Dagestani level grappling and then's got the good jiu-jitsu to go with it. No, he's one of those jiu-jitsu fighters who, I don't like saying this, but this is what people say, one of these soy ones where they can't get takedowns. So how people describe Brian Ortega. He can strike, but He's not got like really good takedowns, but when he's got you on the ground, he can do good jiu-jitsu with you on the ground. Not what I'm saying, but what I've heard. Because Blake Bilder, what I'll say about him is not soy, but he just can't grapple. Like, he can't get takedowns. He can wrestle on the ground and do jiu-jitsu. He just can't get the initial takedowns working. Like Yeong, he's not got amazing takedown defense. He's not that good. He can get taken down. Look at what happened when he fought in his last fight. And Blake Bilder, I think, will struggle against Jeong Lee because he actually has got good takedown defense. His opponent went for like 21 takedowns, only got 5. And on the feet, in one of his fights, from what I saw, he is so explosive. And I think that will cause a problem for Blake Bilder. Like, he can struggle with people who can explode in the pocket and who are on the back foot and can explode. A bit like Kyle Nelson, who can use those elbows and kick off the back foot. Jeong Lee will not really kick, he'll look to use boxing. He fights a bit like Michael Chandler at times, wildly swinging, reckless, which could lead to takedowns. And because looking at him, I don't think he's too big either. I know you might see his muscles there, but when we're talking about size, Blake Bilder's more like blocky, and that might help him on the ground and stuff. So he might submit Jeong Lee, but I do think Lee will be able to keep it on the feet. Bilder will struggle with the takedowns and he'll win a 29-28 decision. Right, this is the fight here which I'm very confused about. And I am going with Pete Rodriguez. And you're going to be like, how are you going with Pete Rodriguez? Themba Gorimbo, he got really popular because of like The Rock bought my house and stuff. And I don't know why, but I feel like that's influencing the vote. I know Pete Rodriguez is small. But look at how Volkanovski, I'm joking. But look at that fight with Mike Jackson. Okay, he shouldn't be in the UFC. Worst UFC fighter in history, in my opinion. Maybe not CM Punk, but after him. And then he did lose to Jack Della Maddalena, which actually started off quite well and then got countered. And I don't blame him for losing that fight. But Themba Gorimbo, in my opinion, I want him to win because he needs the money and stuff. But I just don't think he's that good, honestly. In that fight with Sato, he looked so sloppy. Gas Tank don't even look too great. Like, look at that fight of AJ Fletcher. He was doing well with getting the takedowns, but then eventually gets tired, starts lunging over, not fully committing to takedowns, and then gets his neck snatched. And against Pete Rodriguez, from what I've seen as well, he can grapple. He hasn't shown it in the UFC, but in other promotions, he can. So I think he's got a better gas tank, he hits harder, and I know he's only 5-1, and you see Themba Gorimbo, who's got good grappling, and him being bigger should make it easier to control him, but I'm actually going to pick Rodriguez to KO him in the second round. Not the first, because Gorimbo, I think he'll come out heavy grappling. Rodriguez will be like trying to defend against him whilst being against the cage, but then round 2, he'll start to apply the pressure like he did to Mike Jackson, and because Gorimbo will be a bit tired from using the grappling, which he usually does, he'll end up getting TKO'd via, I'm going to say, it sounds stupid, but ground and pound after getting knocked down. Right, Charles Johnson versus Azat Maksum. In a weird way, Johnson could actually win this fight, but I don't think he will. I think Azat Maksum will win the fight 29-28 because, one, Charles Johnson, I hope they don't release him. They need him in a very small flyweight division, and he's always having entertaining fights. So like that fight with Ode Osbourne, it just looked like two guys who were having a tear-up in a pub. Ode Osbourne, of all people, was having grappling success against Charles Johnson. Azat Maksum has struggled to get control. But I've noticed against Charles Johnson, opponents tend to get control time because even though he's got good takedown defense, usually he has them nights where he doesn't, and he'll get back up to the feet, but then he'll get taken back down to the ground again. An example of that was Muhammad Mokaev, which again, was not bad looking at it now. But when you look at that fight with Cody Durden, the way he was able to take the back like that, Azat Maksum, I don't see him submitting him, I really don't, because he ain't that type of fighter. He usually likes to set up kicks to the body and then fire off with the hands, or switch stance and then kick the body and then set up with the hands from the other stance. Creative. But he lost to Tyson Nam, and I don't know why he didn't give it to Nam. Maybe because he was old. A lot of people picked Azat Maksum. The companies wanted him to lose money. People to lose money. So I know that doesn't have any relevance to him beating Charles Johnson, but I just think he gets controlled too much against people. He's come up against quite a few grapplers now, and I think Azat Maksum fits him perfectly. And Ode Osbourne's not really a grappler, but it still worked. And even when he fought against Zalgas in that fight, Zalgas was tearing up the legs. And I know Azat don't do leg kicks, but Charles Johnson striking is overrated. He has no power. I can't remember the last time he finished someone. And I don't want to talk about the Jimmy Flick, because Jimmy Flick's got one of the worst chins in the UFC. He just gets finished with ease. Well, not one of the worst chins, but weak durability is the correct word. And as at Maksum, he struggles to maintain control, which is why I can see a lot of takedowns happening, but very low control time. And the takedowns combined with the kick into the body, I think will gas out Johnson. And by round 3, he'll be very gassed and he'll end up losing rounds, I'm going to say 1 and 3. Gilbert Urbina versus Charles Radtke. I have no idea why people are picking this guy at all. Gilbert Urbina, in my opinion, you could argue maybe a lock to win this fight, even though picking a lock is very hard to do, because Charlie Radtke, all he tries to do is be like Bilal Muhammad and hold you against the cage. So what I think Gilbert Urbina will do is, whilst Charles Radtke is going to try and clinch him, because Urbina's much bigger than him, he's going to be able to easily stop the takedowns. And you know what, I've changed my mind. I think Urbina will win this fight via submission, because he actually can do a bit of jiu-jitsu. Like, if you don't believe me, I can literally show you myself. There you go, not many fights, but he has fought people like Sean Brody, Trajan Gore, Brian Battle, which he did take down to start off quite alright. But in my opinion, Charles Radtke is nothing special. He's very basic, and I think holding on to him against the cage, dipping his head down low, not looking for a takedown, I think he's going to give away his neck and get guillotine choke in this fight. And I know he's on a 5-fight winning streak, but that will come to an end when he fights Urbina. Even with the striking, he was getting hit with those spinning back fists. Urbina's a rangy guy. He can just use the range and kick him away like he kicked Orion to the body. He can do that if he really wants to. But I think he's going to snatch up a counter guillotine and submit Charles Radtke from trying to hold on. Right, Makhmud Muradov versus Aliaskhab Khizriev. I don't know how to pronounce the name. I'm going with Makhmud Muradov via first round KO. That fight with Brian Barberena, he put him into a, you know the next word, because he destroyed him. Hooking him, dropping him, but it was like he was being too nice and he didn't want to finish him. It was like he was a psychopath, just wanted to beat him up but not finish him. There was times where I'm like, why doesn't he jump on top of him and ground and pound him? Because his grappling is actually decent. And now let's talk about Aliaskhab. He has got alright wrestling, and I say alright, and I'm going to tell you why I'm not saying amazing. You look at his record and think, oh my god, it's a Dagestani wrestler. He's going to go out there and just maul him. But hang on a minute. Makhmud Muradov, okay, he got submitted by Gerald Meerschaft, who, on his day, can beat quite a few middleweights. Like, look how he beat Bruno Silva by dropping him. Looked like he was drunk out there, Paulo Costa style. And he's very good with overhands, and he was able to find some good success against Muradov and get the submission. But that was because his timing was on point. Khizriev hasn't got Gerald Meerschaft type of striking. His striking is very basic, and his head movement as well, it's not really that great either. And that's why I think when he comes up against Muradov, for the people saying he'll go out there and ragdoll him, let me just show you this. Believe it or not, I only just found it out now. Makhmud Muradov has the record, I believe, at middleweight for the most takedowns in a single fight. Right, here you go. Look over here. Makhmud Muradov against Brian Barberena, 13 out of 16 takedowns. You go to Wikipedia. Most takedowns landed in a single bout. It has the top 5. And there might be another middleweight who had 13, but from what I've found out, no, there isn't, apart from Makhmud Muradov. So it should be him and Murad right here. Most takedowns. So I don't want to hear the thing about he can't grapple. He can. Like, he made it competitive with Araujo. He didn't win the fight, but he made it competitive with him. And he's a good wrestler, so I think he's going to struggle to get these takedowns on him, and I think he's going to be flat-footed on the feet. He doesn't really move his head. He's very central. Makhmud Muradov throws with intention with every punch, trying to get the knockout, which could be bad for his cardio and could open takedown attempts. But I think when he touches Khizriev on the chin, I know he's never been knocked out before, but look at the guys who he's been fighting. And it reminds me a bit like that other guy who fought Jamal Emmers, I can't remember his name, it begins with a K, had a good record going into the UFC, got fraud checked. And okay, Aliaskhab had a fight against a journeyman who shouldn't be in the UFC, Dennis Stoliarenko. I don't even know if he's still in there, probably not. So against Makhmud, a guy who's quite tough, he got signed by Mayweather, which I still don't get. It's the most random thing ever. Imagine if out of nowhere Tyson Fury just signed, I'm just trying to think of the most random type of thing, just signed Brandon Moreno. It just looked ridiculous and random, and there's probably more of a logical backstory to why it happened, but I don't know why I'm talking about that. I just think that Makhmud has got the power and it's got the takedown defense and the takedown offense to make it competitive against Aliaskhab. So anyways, yeah. Natalia Silva against Viviane Araujo. Oh my god. Natalia Silva, in my opinion, locked to win this fight. I can't say it's going to be a KO because it's WMMA and I'm not really a fan of it. But she's one fighter where it's like, she's not a man, but she fights like a man. A little bit. So, I think a decision for her, 30-27. Viviane Araujo is going to look to try and get takedowns. She's old. She's not going to be able to get the takedowns and just going to get lit up by spinning back kicks and being pushed up against the cage and just getting outstriked using measuring the distance and just domination in the striking department. So, yeah, that's how I think she wins that fight. Right. Randy Brown versus Muslim Salikhov. In my opinion, I don't know what to pick anymore. I'm starting to think, I did pick Randy Brown if he can use the range, because Muslim Salikhov is very overrated. But then I'm starting to think, I know he lost to Dolby, but he puts on a high pace, and that's a very hard matchup for a lot of fighters. He lost to Li Jingliang, okay. He beat people like Andre Fialho, Trinaldo, that's a good win to have in your record. Zaleski, even though it was a split. You know what, I've changed my mind. I'm going with Salikhov. It might end up backfiring, but I think the Kung Fu background, I think his striking will just look better than Randy Brown, because Randy Brown, he has got a good range and he's got a good jab. We saw it against, what was his name? Jack Della Maddalena. He'll start off quite fast, whereas Muslim Salikhov, he can start off quite slow and build up in confidence throughout the fight. I don't think he'll mix up takedowns, but I think when he starts getting them spinning wheel kicks going, because Randy Brown's tall, they're going to be easier to land compared to if he was smaller. If he was smaller and he's throwing that spinning leg kick, I think they would just wrap around the top of his head. But because he's tall, the target's more open for them spinning back kicks. And I think that's something that Muslim Salikhov likes to do. A lot of these Kung Fu style type of kicks. And eventually I think one's going to catch him. And I think he's going to win a decision. I don't think he'll KO him, even though I think Randy Brown's chin can be kind of suspect. I think he'll win a very tight, again, 29-28 decision. Right, here's the fight which some would say should be the main event. And look at the votes, 50-50. Who am I picking to win the fight? Renato Moicano or Drew Dober? I'm going with Renato Moicano, and I think he can do it via round 1 submission. And I'm not going to say round 2, because with Renato Moicano, he's very aggressive from the start, looking for the finish. Like, look at that Damir Hadzivanovic fight. It was like, well, why did you have to submit me? He was annoyed why he submitted him in the first round. It was some weird situation, but Drew Dober, Chad Jaw, comes forward, wants to be in your face, will eat a shot, come forward, probably got the best chin at lightweight. I'm trying to think, was there anyone else at lightweight with a better chin than him? There probably is, but you've got to put him up there. And there used to be an argument on Reddit saying how he'd be a hard fight for Justin Gaethje. Maybe the reckless Gaethje, but not this Gaethje. Not the defensive one where he's actually trying to fight properly instead of going into like a barb roll. And Renato Moicano, are people forgetting about that fight with Calvin Kattar? One thing he could do against Drew Dober, but he has to do it early, is chew up the leg kicks. Like, he was destroying the legs of Calvin Kattar back in the day. But the only problem with Moicano is his chin, so it's kind of like a gamble pick. But I do think he can get a submission done, because Drew Dober, you'll see that he tends to lose to these guys with good jiu-jitsu. And a guy like Renato Moicano, if he can grab hold of the clinch when Drew Dober swings wide to break on top of him, to try and like land a heavy combination, I think that will allow him to get the transition to where he can take the back from Drew Dober being like really powerful. And he's not as reckless as Chandler, but he does throw with power with every strike. Most knockouts in lightweight, I believe. And I do think Renato Moicano, if he gets touched by one, he goes down. But I'm confident in Moicano that he is going to latch onto the clinch and then use it to take the back. And once he's got the back of Drew Dober, in my opinion, he wins that fight. Because Drew Dober, he's one of those fighters where he's just pressure and power. And it was an early stoppage in his, not last fight, he actually fought Ricky Glenn. I forgot about that fight. That was just the fight where it was inevitable with what was going to happen. A lock should have never got made after he got starched in his last fight. I feel bad for Ricky Glenn. Getting knocked out twice. One against a Can, who he shouldn't really be getting knocked out by. It should have been the opposite. And then you give him Drew Dober. An even worse matchup, making his chin even worse. But Drew Dober, he has got a good chance though. But I think he needs to be a bit more patient, because if he rushes, like I've mentioned, it's going to open up things for Moicano in terms of getting the back. And look at that Rafael dos Anjos fight. You've seen that he can struggle against people who like to be quite aggressive with him. And that's why I can see why you think Drew Dober has got a very good chance, which he does. But in my opinion, I think Renato Moicano, if he can get the kicks going, maybe push him away, not allow his back to be against the cage, then I think he should be able to win this fight via submission or decision. No way does he TKO him or even drop him, or even make him bleed for that matter. The only thing he could do is maybe break the leg, not break it literally, but like destroy the leg, then eventually take the sting out of his punch and then take the back. Nassourdine Imavov. I'm going with Nassourdine Imavov. I want to quickly look. Yeah, I did do that. Imavov by decision. I was thinking maybe a KO, but I'm starting to think that his cardio is so inconsistent. Like, look at that fight with Buckley, where rounds 1 and 2, he did so well, even mixing up takedowns and ground and pound. And his ground and pound is severely underrated in my opinion, but he likes to strike. And actually won the 5th round against Sean Strickland, in my opinion. Did quite well, landing with the last punch in his combinations. And he's got a great chin. Roman Dolidze, all he does is pressure and try and look for the knockout by just walking you down. That won't work against Nassourdine Imavov. His footwork's too good. And the only time where I think he'll be dangerous is from rounds 1 to 2. After that, I think it'll be more like sluggish, but Nassourdine Imavov can pull through it, because Roman Dolidze is not really a cardio machine, but he's also not very like technical. So that's why I think the more rounds that go by, it goes into Imavov's favour. But not by like a significant amount, but just, he would just win the fight is how I think. Because Roman Dolidze, he wants to be on the bottom. He doesn't actually want to be on top of you, because I made a video on it. I'll put a link there. He kind of like triangle chokes you and then uses that to then get your leg whilst you're trapped in the triangle choke. Next thing you know, you're either in a calf slicer or he's got your back. And I think Nassourdine Imavov, the power he's got as well, is underrated. And Roman Dolidze is getting quite old, 35 at middleweight, and it feels like he hasn't even been here for that long. But I look at that fight with Trevin Giles. If Trevin Giles, who is not a technical striker, is dropping him, I know it was a while back, but Nassourdine Imavov with them straight punches, they are going to connect, because again, Roman Dolidze don't move his head. It's not really that fluid. He's like a stiff target who has got a very powerful overhand on him, where if it touches you, you could go down. Like, he could knock out Imavov. Like, he was rocking Marvin Vettori. I believe he won that fight against Vettori. But Imavov, he won't leave his back against the cage like Marvin Vettori. He was like letting Roman Dolidze come forward and trying to leg kick whilst being on the back foot. Imavov will go backwards, but he will throw punches going backwards and land, unlike Vettori. And whilst going backwards, like, move off the cage and then put Roman Dolidze against the cage. And I think that's where it can cause him some problems. Also, you can't bully him. Like, Strickland was trying to clinch at times, and I don't think Roman Dolidze can do it, even though he's bigger and he's had a few fights at heavyweight, or like one fight, the one at light heavyweight. But a lot of these middleweights are bigger than middleweight anyway, we all know that. But I think Imavov should be able to deal with the clinch work of Roman Dolidze. But he has to be careful not to stay there for long, because Roman Dolidze, look what he did to Kyle Dalkaus with that like brutal knee. You allow your back to be on the cage for too long, allow him to get good control, then he can do that. But then are we forgetting about the Chris Curtis fight? He was steamrolling through Chris Curtis using the grappling. Like, I think his grappling is good enough to stop the takedowns of Roman Dolidze. Roman Dolidze anyway wants to fight someone who will try and take him down most of the time. And I think Imavov at one point, he probably will mix up a takedown. I don't want him to, but I can see him doing that because his takedowns are very good. And he's got some good ground and pound, like that crucifix he got on, what was his name? Daniel Shabazian. Oh, Edmund, not Daniel. And yeah, that's who I think's going to win. So thank you for watching. Talk to you soon.